All right. I think that is going. Well, good afternoon, everyone who's joining. Appreciate you all being here. The first thing I kind of wanted to know is that if you have other people watching with you from your board or whatever, and they didn't actually register like you did, please make sure you email me afterwards, just to make sure that they get that credit. So yeah, if you have other people watching with you, just make sure you email me so I can give you guys that credit for that. Otherwise, if you registered, I will get your name, I'll mark you down, all that good stuff. So, but yeah, a few other quick just reminders before I hand things over to Allie to kind of get us started is that we have a few deadlines coming up for things. The first thing I wanted to make note of is that our technical assistance applications for our Indiana accredited and our nationally accredited organizations is March 18th. If you need some flexibility on that deadline and you need a little bit more time, just email me. We can talk about that. But otherwise, try to get in those TA applications by March 18th. We have the Grow Your Own Storytellers workshop coming up on March 21st. And so definitely hope we see a lot of you there. It's going to be really, really amazing. If you haven't ever looked up Phil Ike or Storyville, he's amazing. He's going to be leading this, basically showing you how to do exactly what he does every day when he's capturing these community stories. And so the registration has been out for that. I'm probably going to be closing that end of next week, just so we can get firm numbers for our food, but it's free, and lunch and light breakfast will be provided. So definitely encourage you to be there if you can. And then my last reminder is that if you are registered for the Main Street Now conference in Birmingham, make sure you fill out that form that Abby Huff has been sending out. And I think I've sent it out. I think we have it a lot of places, but it's a Google form just so we can make sure that you're on that list and that while we're at conference, we can be getting in contact with you if we're going to meet up somewhere or, whatever other updates we might need to send you. So those are my boring announcements. Now, I'm super excited that Allie Daughtery from our own agency here at Okra is going to be leading our Lunch and Discuss today. So we've been trying to kind of bring in some various partners from across the state from different organizations, but we also wanted to make sure that you guys are getting to see some of our other faces at our agency other than just our team. And so Allie is wonderful. Obviously, I know some of you have probably worked closely with her if you're in the Northeast region because she is our community liaison for that area. And super knowledgeable, especially in leadership, which is what she's going to be talking about today. So I know this is going to be pretty conversational too. So whether you either throw it in the chat or unmute, definitely interact, give your thoughts, and we'll have some time at the end as well, since I know a lot of you are board members, that we would love for you to, ask us any questions if you have questions for the Indiana Main Street team or for Allie, and I may have a few other prompts for you there. But with that, Allie, I will pass it over to you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Abby. I am happy to be here with you all today. As Abby mentioned, we are going to be focusing on leadership. Particularly, there is a style of leadership I wanted to focus on. If I can get my screen to share, there we go. So it's a leadership style that's a little bit newer to the discussion realm. So you may or may not have heard of it yet. But the idea is purpose-driven leadership. And as Abby mentioned, it's very conversational today. I want to get your thoughts rolling as well as get some conversations going because that's where the best learning happens. So just to think of, have you heard of purpose-driven leadership yet? And if so, do you consider yourself a purpose-driven leader? Just some questions for thought. So we are going to kick things off with a couple things in the chat just to get your brains moving for this lunch and learn. A minute or two, basically, some self-reflection questions. I'd love to see answers in the chat to any of the following or all of the following. So what type of leader do you currently classify yourself as? How does that help drive the purpose of your Main Street? And does your current style of leadership potentially hinder progress, or do you feel like it's causing some conflicts within your own organization? So as I said, feel free to put those in the chat. Abby, I'm not sure that I can see the chat while presenting, so.
Yeah, I can read stuff out as people submit it for sure.
Fabulous. So like I said, we'll make it just a little bit of time to think about it. If you don't want to share in the chat, that's okay, but it just makes it a little bit more fun to see what everyone's thinking.
While people are kind of thinking, I feel like I always usually like the term, or at least the kind of leader at least I aspire to be, and I hope that I am, is like servant leader, in terms of like really wanting to think about how I putting people maybe before myself and wanting to help them grow and them, which, yeah, I think can be difficult sometimes as a leader, but also. Okay, Sandy in the chat said, I strive to be a servant leader. I only ask others to do what I would do myself.
That's a great thought process. Yeah. And servant leaders are honestly very, very common in the nonprofit sector because you are serving a larger purpose. But that's where purpose leadership, as we talk about purpose-driven leadership, as we talk about it a little bit more, will kind of connect and how the two can work together and intermingle. The more deep diving I did into this specific type of leadership is kind of the one I identify with, and I'll explain why a little bit more as we get into things.
Just waiting to see if we see any more comments. I see some typing, so.
Fabulous.
Also, if you don't know what kind of leader you are, that's okay too. I feel like.
It is. It is.
Dean Vonderheide said, I consider myself a principle-centered leader. It serves me well and has not created any obstacles.
You want to change it? No, let's watch this.
Okay, make sure we're muted. There we go.
Okay. So
I also see, sorry, one more, Allie.
No,
Teresa said, I'm a new board member and I just took on the secretary role. I was an ex officio for 3 years. Strive to be a servant leader too. Not always successful. It's difficult sometimes, for sure.
It is. It is. So as we're thinking about the types of leaders we are and how that potentially drives us, one more thing to think about you sharing in the chat. What types of leaders do you see emerging in your organization? So this is not necessarily reflecting on yourself, but what type you see as a mixture amongst your current board, leadership team, could be within your city government that's part of leading some of your efforts, as well as maybe staff members. And so do you think of your current board members as leaders for both your community and your organization when you're thinking about those leadership titles? So again, just a couple minutes in the chat. I promise not everything's going to be in the chat, but I want to get you thinking about some of these first.
Some typing, so. Teresa says that our team's committed and involved, which is why I felt comfortable stepping up myself. That's a really good point. Yeah. You don't want to get involved in something where it seems like nobody else is doing anything or really taking the leadership to do things. So that makes sense. Abby Huff says, one thing we see from our most successful Main Street organizations are when leaders share the workload and work with other organizations in the community. They are not afraid to ask for help.
Fabulous. Yeah, that is very important. Asking for help is important in any leadership role, and understanding where your capacity lies, and not over exceeding that capacity all the time is not going to help you be a strong leader. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you see any more typing?
I do see a couple. Okay. Yeah, I see a couple more. I also think for those of you who are kind of thinking through some of this, it's also helpful to think about, do you think your own board members see themselves as leaders? I think sometimes it's, like a lot of people don't even see themselves as being a leader. And so just something to think about. Dean Vonderheide says, community-focused movers and shakers, they are carrying the workload. Awesome. A couple more typing. Christine said, our board president, Brian, considers himself a transformational leader. I like that.
I like that. I do. I haven't heard that one in a little while.
And then Darla says, participative leadership comes to mind for our board. Everyone listens and is involved in the decision making. I'm vice president for the Heart of Jasper. That's awesome.
Fabulous. Okay.
Great.
So I am going to go ahead and jump into the rest of the presentation. If things come up during any of this that you want to ask immediate questions or kind of talk more about it, feel free to interject at any time, Abby. And then I also want to add, if you start to think about, okay, maybe this is what she's talking about, then this type of leadership style comes to mind for me, feel free to throw it in later because I'd love to see what kind of mix we've got in the group today. So looking at what we're going to talk about today, today's lesson is going to help identify what a purpose-driven leader is, connect your board member recruitment to the importance of community leadership, and re-engage current board members with a purpose. So it's important that Main Street board members feel empowered in their leadership as if you have a staff person. So we know a lot of our Main Street organizations only have volunteer boards and don't always have either that capital or figured out exactly how to work in a full-time paid director or a part-time director into the situation. And if you don't have that director, it's important that you understand you are also empowered to make change in your community and act as leadership for your organization as you have that board title. So the board should be holding part of the organization on their shoulders because it's a heavy expectation for absolutely everyone to do anything just by themselves. It's a board for a group effort, and therefore that strong leadership to bring you all together is vital for success for your organization. So talking about identifying purpose, I've got here, and I'm not going to read it all to you because I did copy it off the Main Street website. Hopefully some of this is somewhat familiar. In order to work with a purpose-driven leadership style, we must first together establish purpose. So as I noted, I included here the purpose behind Indiana Main Street as a larger organization. Each individual Main Street organization that exists in our state is kind of focused a little bit on these core principles, but they also have their own extra purposes that come through their work that they do daily, as well as when they're connecting with others. So we're encouraging you to add on to that core and make other things to make your community thrive. For example, we see some downtowns that have a lot more historic aspects that are still available to them compared to others, have more of that storytelling that's occurring because maybe the buildings couldn't be saved, but they still have a huge story to tell. So as we're identifying purpose, it's important to remember your community is your purpose. So as we're talking about purpose-driven leadership, we're identifying a purpose and allowing that purpose to drive us in our actions. So you're looking at why am I doing what I'm doing and focusing on that why very frequently. I mentioned I identify with this very well because a lot of my coworkers will laugh if I say that why is my favorite word because they know I ask a lot of questions. So where does the idea of purpose-driven leadership come from? Purpose-driven leadership, as I mentioned, is helping employees or even board members find personal meaning in their work and fostering deeply committed workforce that thrives on shared goals and aspirations. So we're thinking about those shared goals and aspirations for that purpose we identified as your community. So that's how we're getting things done. When you can connect well with your purpose and your goals and aspirations, it leads to a much more driven person, someone that's able to connect a lot more with their directors, volunteers, community members, board members. How many organizations do you know of in your community that you've heard of that aren't driven and don't have true purpose an identification with their mission. Because if they don't have that, you probably haven't heard of them. You aren't aware of what they're doing because they don't have that passion attached with that purpose. So we're finding that purpose together. So how can you help new volunteers, board members, and community members find and follow the purpose you found? So we're looking at how can we bring on those new board members, those new volunteers, other individuals in the community, and how do you help them learn your purpose? So for example, when we're looking with new volunteers, those job descriptions that we talk about a lot in the Main Street world really can help them understand how they fit into the big picture, what exactly they're responsible for, and how they are working towards that larger purpose, aka your community. Board members need that orientation or some sort of training and kind of a little bit of hands-on approach of learning exactly where they fit in the purpose as well. Each individual board member serves as a very unique position that brings different things to the table. So we want to make sure we're looking at how can their purpose, the community, identify with their individual personal passion and drive. Community members also need opportunities to learn. Whether or not they're physically involved with your organization through giving their time, talent, or treasure, they need to know what's happening so they can be supportive of your purpose through word of mouth. They understand exactly what you're doing for their community and why they should be in support versus naysayers of change in the community. If we aren't giving those opportunities to learn, we can't make change through that identified purpose together. So one of the things I really like to connect together. So purpose results in a drive. A drive is that passion that's going to get things done. And when you have passionate people, you result in gathering time, talent, and treasure to get the things done that you're looking to get done with your organization. And each of those individual aspects of donation of time, talent, and treasure really are equal in their own individual ways. You can't get anything done if you don't have anyone donating time. You could have a huge donor come in with a very large check, but if you don't have those individuals to get the things done, the check doesn't mean as much. It's not going to do as much because you have to have those that know how to get the time done for distributing that check into that exact project that it was for. So looking at how can purpose-driven leadership help you when identifying new board members or re-engaging current board members? Just a second to think about it. I won't give you a ton of time in the chat, but how can identifying that purpose when you're driving leadership help you identify new board members as well as re-engaging the current board members? Well, when we're looking at the larger community as itself, how do we identify new board members? Do we see those people that have been in the community for years and years and years, or they have a family that's had a large stake in the community for a long period of time, and how they can work together to bring back that mission or that picture that they saw of the image from when they were growing up or when their parents were growing up in the community. Those are the individuals that are going to have a different type of passion and purpose when they're driving the leadership through your community because they have a family stake in it. But you've got your current board members. Remember why you approached them as a board member to begin with. How does their individual job or their current talents engage with that purpose that you're driving through your leadership or re-engaging current board members? So few things for thought. How did you identify new board members when you originally were picking your board? Let's see in the chat. How did you identify? What were the ways that you look through to decide these are the people I want to approach as a board member?
Not seeing anything yet, but I'll
tell you when I do. Okay. You're okay. As well as when you know that there's the board members that sign on year after year. Now, we want to see term limits so they don't get burnt out. But those that come back time after time as either a board member or they came back as a volunteer because they love being a board member, what types of things made you identify them?
Do some typing. Kim Stevens said they have a passion for the Main Street program. Russell said he looked for people with a passion for revitalizing our downtown and that have time to serve. Kate Baker said people who had already served as volunteers or committee members, people who were already advocates of the community. And a couple more people type in. Darla also said skill set, enthusiasm, and we tap into those that volunteer and have connection to the downtown in some way.
So thinking about those, we talked a lot about those that already had that connection, already had a passion for the Main Street program, but we remember going back to that purpose of why do they want better? It's because it's their community that they live in or their community that they have an invested interest in. Sometimes you have business owners that may not live in the community, but they have a business in the community. So they have a different type of vested interest in your downtown and how you're going to revitalize the story that exists there, as well as utilizing purpose, your community, to drive your decisions and working through what exactly you want to see for your downtown. So talking in recruitment and retention, we did a little bit of discussion with it on the previous slide, but a continued focus on purpose behind your organization and purpose-driven leadership can really help in that recruitment and retention. The reason being is when you're looking at recruiting, as we previously talked about, we're looking at those that are already involved in the community. However, when we're recruiting, we also don't want to choose as we just went through stellar training this week. So the word same old six is stuck in my head, and it's going to be probably for about a month because I heard it enough recently. But we don't want those same old six at the table of those that are involved in absolutely everything. You do want to identify people based on what their purpose is in the community as to how invested they are. And you'd be surprised at some of the new people you can draw to the table that act as leaders within your community, because a leader is not necessarily someone with a title. A leader is someone that leads to get things done behind that purpose through purpose-driven leadership. So I wanted to leave a ton of time for questions and thoughts, Abby, because I feel like this is very conversational, but I don't know.
No, that's fine.
If we've got enough questions.
So while people are kind of thinking about maybe if there is any kind of questions off of that, and if not, I can, I think Allie and I can both also do some prompts here, but I did want to mention that there were a few other people in the chat who mentioned in the ways that they were engaging volunteers. Someone said they were already providing input on projects, involved in scheduled community activities, wanted to influence the type of businesses locating in the downtown. Someone also said some of our board wasn't as familiar with Main Street, but we're invested in building community. And then someone also said we looked at people who had been involved in the past, either as a volunteer, board, or committee member, or attended events and have expressed an interest in our Main Street organization in downtown. And then for our board members, we look for vision, motivation, teamwork, and their regular environment, because that will translate well into Main Street, which I think is a really good way to approach it, because I think as many of you are board members, something that I think we desire for you, at least at the coordinating level, but I know your local programs want this as well, is that you feel very connected to the purpose of what not only what the whole Main Street network is doing, but also locally what this means, like what Allie was saying for you earlier. So being able to really understand clearly what your mission is, what is that motivation, how you work together as a team, because even if you do have a staff person, that's great, but as a board, it's your job to be leading the charge. It's not that staff person's job. And so really being able to connect into that that leadership and that purpose is important. And it's hard if that feels kind of blurry or not clearly understood by everybody. So I definitely think this is an important conversation in that sense. But yeah, does anyone have any thoughts, questions on this topic for Allie? If so, feel free to either unmute or throw thoughts or questions in the chat. This can be pretty, yeah, open to what you guys need. And then I have a few other questions, but I'll hold off until you guys ask yours first.
We also have a unique audience today, as it was driven towards board members, and I wanted to make sure we were addressing the right conversations and questions that come up, because we have a very different perspective working in it in our everyday lives compared to giving that extra time. So I wanted to make sure to give you all that time. And as Abby mentioned, with some of those different things that we're looking at, a lot of those fall back into what you see as a purpose-driven leader. And I think a lot of people maybe hadn't heard the term before of purpose-driven. They just thought of I do this because I have passion. Well, there is actually a title related to that. So you can say that I drive with a purpose, or I am a leader with a purpose.
Allie, one of the things that I think we tried to do when we established our board was look for diverse backgrounds and cultures to be involved too. I think the more diverse you are, the stronger you are.
Yes, and that's definitely something that we look at the state level as well. Are you looking at diverse audience? The important thing to remember is diversity comes in all types of different ways. It can be age, it can be ethnicity, it can be where you grew up, for choosing those that grew up in the area versus those that didn't grow up in the area, so that you can get different ideas at the table and different ways of getting things done. So yeah, that's a very important way to look at how you're building your board, is through diversity.
And for those that are nationally accredited and Indiana accredited, that is a part of your accreditation, as you know. And just like Allie was saying, we usually look at, we want you to be true to your community. So yeah, looking at of your own community, might not look and what we sometimes think of classic diversity, but you have diversity in your community. And so being able to tap into that is important. And then Russell had a question in here, Allie, about any tips on re-empowering board members to lead the charge.
I think honestly, sometimes you might go back to the basics, and it's a little bit more surprising than what you think. We all know that as a Main Street organization, you've accomplished some things, and that because you've accomplished them and maybe they happened so long ago, they fall off your radar. You forget about how much time and effort it took to get the things done that you did get done. So maybe it's honestly doing a little bit of 15-minute board session of talking about your favorite accomplishments you've had through the organization since you've been there, especially when you have some board members that have been there forever. They've seen lots of different things accomplished, but if they're only volunteering to do the board position versus a volunteer that does other things, or they are on multiple boards, sometimes they forget what they actually have accomplished, and that can kind of reignite that fire of how to re-engage them, as well as going back to the basics of talking about your mission. Your mission and vision is, again, part of that purpose that's meant to drive you. So if through those two different things that those aren't re-engaging that fire or that willpower and passion, maybe their time has come to transition as well.
That's a really good answer. I would say the same thing. Go back to the beginning. I think that's really important. Kata, you can go ahead and unmute. I see your hands up.
Thank you. And sorry I was late. I was having fun with my design committee.
We all got things to do. It's okay.
Work plans and stuff. But so in terms of transitioning kind of board members who seem to have lost their passion, if you don't already have that in your bylaws, is it kind of going back to basics and getting that in your bylaws? If conversations and hints and things aren't really getting it done voluntarily, we have a few that we're looking at right now who are lovely people, but they're kind of taking up room.
I think it's definitely something you could look at. It's going to be a little bit hard to put it in exact writing in your bylaws if they've lost their fire and passion. But if you're doing those annual or maybe every 6 months where you're doing a little bit of a re-engagement session, reminding the things you've gotten done and thanking people for their efforts, you could potentially put in some sort of, and I say anonymous, but it's not really anonymous because they're saying they want out, but some sort of survey that doesn't go through the entire board particularly, so they're not put on the spot in a board meeting to say, hey, I want out, where they can, hey, I want to have a conversation with you, and maybe having that one-on-one conversation might reignite that spark a little bit better than being in that larger setting. And if it still doesn't, giving them an exit strategy of, hey, you committed to this amount of time on the board. We understand that we want to have dedicated and passionate people at the table, and we don't want to drop our board numbers extensively. So we're going to ask that you stay on for at least X amount of time after you've chosen to exit, and potentially that they give you at least 3 names of individuals that they might recommend that you connect with to see if they would be interested in a board position, because they might be at a stage in their life where it's not that they've lost their passion, but we all have things that come up. We all have things that kind of take away our attention, and we were really ignited and really involved in all of the things and wanting to do great things for our community, but something happened and we can't give the same passion, but it doesn't mean we never will have the passion again.
Got it. Thanks a lot. I think that's helpful. We also just put together a nominating committee, which is sort of, we're getting into now figuring out what a rhythm is for evaluating the board, even anonymously, kind of from objective perspective. So hopefully that'll help too. I think there's just a few people who maybe come to one board meeting a year. So it's kind of more those people that I was curious about. And I think you reminded me that process will take care of that.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yeah. And the other thing to think about too is when you're looking at what you're putting in your bylaws, yes, we want to hold individuals accountable, but if we're going to approach all walks of life, we also have to have realistic expectations of what they are and are not able to bring to the table. So if you're approaching potentially the single mother that works the night shift, understanding that maybe she's not going to be able to come to your night meetings, but you do want her perspective, so you invite her to participate in a different capacity.
Awesome. Thank you. And Abby, I just saw the board member contract, and we do have an ethics contract, but it's not really this. So thank you both. This is very helpful.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, it definitely is okay to have an attendance policy in your bylaws. So if that's something you don't currently have, that definitely encourage you, just because that's something from the start, and you can have it in that board member contract as well, just saying, hey, it's the expectation that, and if you can't meet that, that's totally okay. You can also be a committee member or be a one-off volunteer, give them other ways to stay connected to the organization. But yeah, and I know we have a lot of board members on this call, and I think that's something that we also, again, like Allie was saying, we work in this day in and day out. It's our jobs, but also we recognize that you all have families, you have lives outside of this. So, I definitely would be too really interested in continual just feedback and ideas of how do you essentially stay connected and be a working and engaged board member, but also have boundaries as an organization and know kind of what that looks like. And I think having a really clear board member orientation, number one, but number two, having that board member contract from the beginning sometimes can set those expectations and boundaries and help board members too, because we don't want to burn our board members out. And we know you all are working really hard as well. And so it's definitely it's a balancing act of that. So the other thing I wanted to know in the chat was that Abby Huff also said it's okay to recruit members who may not have a current connection to downtown, but have a strong sense of leadership and community, and they can help bring in that kind of outside perspective. So I think that can actually be, I agree with her, that can be really beneficial to your organization, maybe having someone that's not kind of entrenched in the downtown as much as maybe some of our business owners or building owners, or maybe some of the other stakeholders we have in the organization. And then
definitely, because they don't see your downtown every day. If they don't have a regular place in the downtown where that's where they're going to work, etc., they might work out of town because they're in a specialized field, but they still choose to live in your community. I know, ironically, it was, I think, about 6 months ago-ish. Experience the Heart of Kindeville had done some different things in sculptures in their downtown. And that was where my husband grew up, and he drove through downtown, and that's not the normal way he took home. And he comes home, he's like, when did this happen? What is this? And is very excited. And while he doesn't currently live in that exact community anymore or have an exact stakehold in that downtown anymore, that those are people that are going to be excited still about what you're doing, and they're going to have unique perspectives to bring to the table.
Totally agree. Darla also said fundraising skills are very important to helping achieve our purpose, and that is very important to a board, is having some of those fundraising skills and knowledge and a willingness to dive into that, because it can be tricky. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Allie.
It is. And so I'll say I had a parent that ran a nonprofit growing up. So I remember watching her do all the fundraising and watching her go to these early morning meetings for campaigns because it was a larger nonprofit. And it's one of those things of you're pulling a little bit on heartstrings when you're doing larger crowdfunding resources or larger picture things. And if you yourself can't identify your purpose and why exactly you're doing what you're doing and why you need to raise these funds, then you're not going to inspire others or quote unquote pull on those heartstrings to get things going, because without that purpose, you're lost. That purpose equals passion.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is like, I think fundraising can feel also really overwhelming if you don't feel connected to the organization. Yes. And you don't even know how to pitch. And by the way, not every board member needs to be out there doing in-person solicitations. There's a lot of ways to be involved in the fundraising process, even if you're just writing thank you notes or, but those who are maybe doing some more in-person solicitations or, kind of trying to help people see the value, you have to be connected to that purpose to be able to do that. Otherwise, it's going to feel really not natural at all for you to go and talk to people about why they should give money to the organization.
And you may also not be the person leading the charge, but people know you're on the board. So they hear, hey, you guys are raising money for this. I wasn't necessarily approached, but what's going on? Can you tell me about it? And when I'm excited about something, you can tell I'm excited about it when I'm talking about it. If I'm kind of on the fence about it and not so sure what we're talking about, but I'm going with it, then you can definitely tell that in the conversation most of the time anyways. So you want to make sure that you're in tune with what's going on through that purpose of why exactly we're doing what we're doing, how these individual pieces are leading to our larger mission.
Well, I'm not seeing any more kind of specific questions in the chat. Obviously, if one comes to someone's mind, please throw them in here. So I'm going to pivot it just a little bit, but Allie's still going to be here. So if you have other questions about this, keep asking. But one thing I wanted to throw out, because we don't often get a lot of FaceTime with some of our awesome board members. So those of you who are here today and are board members, is there anything at all that you've been kind of wanting to ask the Indiana Main Street team, or just in general kind of wanting to understand more about the program or the process in which we follow to do reporting, or it can be anything, but just something that you want more clarity on or we can answer. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Also, as you're thinking about it, if something comes to mind after we wrap up today, please feel free to, you do not if you do have a staff person, you do not have to go through them to get in contact with us. Our emails are out there. So if you ever just want to send us a direct question, we're always available just as much to you as we are to your staff people of your organization. So yeah, is there any general questions that we can answer for any board members here?
The other important thing to remember too, Abby mentioned I'm in the Northeast region. We have 6 of us across the state that live within our region. So we are accessible we may not be coming for a super formalized training or something like that, that you want to have a one-on-one conversation with your community liaison, someone that's a little bit different perspective because they're not in the day in and day out of what exactly you're doing. We're always happy to come and have a chat. schedule a phone call. Our emails are all on the website. I would say easily found, but it's hidden a little bit if you haven't looked for it. But
I can also
we
drop
all
that
have,
link in there
yeah,
too.
I don't, the website's fun. But so we all are experienced in a little bit of everything. So we are more than happy to answer whatever questions we can. And if it's something that we don't have the exact answer, we will always connect you with our A team at Okra, Abby and Habby. So as well as Alex when we get some special economic development questions.
So Darla asked, as we plan for national accreditation, what are some of the key benefits for our community? That's a really good question. So I know we've kind of said this a lot, and Abby Huff, definitely please jump in with any thoughts you have, or Alex, either of you. But what comes to my mind is that obviously in terms of what we ask of our Indiana accredited or nationally accredited, it's not too much different. We hold both those levels to a pretty high standard. We use the Main Street America standards. There's a few differences, but in terms of that, it's pretty similar. But when it comes to benefits, it's really, I think, number one, you're reaching that national accreditation level really hits a whole different part of the network, right? You're nationally accredited. Yes, we help kind of certify that through our coordinating program, but that accreditation comes directly from Main Street America, which means, number one, that means that you have a paid membership through them. So you get all of their resources, which when you have a membership, that kind of really opens up a whole nother layer of resources that they can offer you. But then you also just have that connection to the network, and it's a really big deal to be called a nationally accredited community. That means you've worked really, really hard to get to that level. It means people understand what that means because it is a national title. And so I think a lot of it too comes down to that, is just really being able to say that, that you're nationally accredited. And then obviously we have some things at Indiana Main Street, some different benefits, when it comes to maybe certain extra funding for certain grant opportunities that come through us and things like that. But I see, Abby, you turned on your camera, so I'll pass it to you for additional thoughts.
Yeah, I think probably talking about like Main Street America and the benefits you get from them from being nationally accredited is more than like what we do as a coordinating program, because our nationally accredited and our Indiana accredited, they get all the same benefits. But nationally, when you become nationally accredited, that opens you up to applying for the Great American Main Street Award. So GAMSA, you might hear that fluttering around, which then if you are a finalist or a semifinalist or a finalist, opens your community up to some pretty big accolades. Madison this year is a semifinalist, and so I think already they're being recognized not only statewide but through the entire country. And then if they were to happen to become nationally accredited, there's like this whole network of people who travel every year. Like their travel is based on going to the Great American Main Street communities. So that just opens the community up to tourism and more highlights, more spotlights. So it's really a big deal to be considered a GAMSA winner. And then Main Street America has started offering some grants to specifically those that are nationally accredited. And we've heard that they're working on more of that. So it's more of what you get from being a part of the Main Street America than with us. But we still obviously are preserving grant, our Main Street revitalization program is coming back. So it all kind of is if you're a nationally accredited or an Indiana accredited community.
Thanks, Abby. That was a good question, though. And I know as board members, that might be something that many of you might be thinking about, whether you're an ODAN or you're nationally accredited. Sometimes I've heard it from quite a few board members of, I think, again, sometimes because, if you have staff people, we engage with them a lot on a day-to-day, but maybe we don't get to engage with you as much. And people can kind of be like, what's maybe the point of being a part of this program? And we're never going to force anyone to or try to sell the program. We hope that you desire to do it, but I definitely think a big part of it is being connected to a network like this. And we want to give you more opportunities as well as a board member to connect. Obviously, you're as you know, you're invited to any of our trainings, any of our in-person events and stuff as well. But I definitely know that we're talking about trying to do more specifically with board members and giving opportunities for you all to connect as a network too. Russell, you asked, will there be a Taking Care of Main Street grant in 2024? I mean, no, we don't have plans for it at this point. In terms of our state funding, we kind of take it year by year and see what we have and what we're able to do. And
we are redirecting some of that funding to a couple other grant opportunities that will be coming out early summer. So stay tuned on those.
Yes, for sure. So as we're kind of getting close to wrapping up here, I also wanted to just kind of reach out there and ask, is there any major struggles as a board member that we can help better support you in, or things that you feel like you need more resources for? So I wanted to give an opportunity that if there is, feel free to throw that in the chat or unmute, because I would love to hear any of that feedback of how we can be more supportive to you all. And, do you feel that your role as a Main Street board member is clear? And if not, again, obviously at the local level, we definitely encourage you guys to have a good orientation process so that is clear, but anything we can do to help continue to provide more information, we want to be able to do that. And so we do have Main Street 101 that will be happening. Those will be happening this summer in every single one of our regions. So that information will be coming out soon. And Allie and I were actually just talking earlier about those tend to be a little bit more, they seem to be more aimed towards communities that are thinking about joining the program. But that being said, they're also a really great refresher. If you're a board member who you're like, I just need to go back to the basics of all of this and remember why, what is Indiana Main Street? What's National Main Street? What is all of this? I just kind of want a quick refresher. Those are a great thing to attend. So keep an eye out for that. We encourage you to register. That can count towards your education credit as an organization. So if you go, that will count towards that if you're a national or Indiana accredited or an ODAN.
It can be a good refresher if you're a board member that's been there for a while, hasn't heard the information a little bit, or if you have a board member that just recently joined the organization right around that time, or you have some prospective board members that you're looking at recruiting and they're like, hey, it can be a really good opportunity to connect with individuals that are in the same stage as they are of being new to the program and learning together. I cannot tell you how many of my Main Streets across my region love to collaborate together and talk through things and really just see what the differences are in how they get things done compared to how another gets it done. And some of those board members rely on different board members across the state to give them a unique perspective that they wouldn't get in their own community.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And it also just provides you a time, like Allie was saying, to network with other people and make those connections, because that is huge. If you're not talking to other Main Street organizations around you, definitely encourage you to be doing that. You're all working towards the same thing and can be partners and supporters of each other. And that's definitely important. So, and a big benefit of the program, of being a part of the program, is having that connection. So
I think too, to remind, if you do have a board that maybe it's a new board or a board that maybe just needs boost in energy, technical assistance for our NOMs, IMS, and aspiring IMS, you can do a board member training. And then for ODANs, reach out to your community liaisons, because we've trained all of them on doing a board member training. So, all of our levels have that option.
Yes, for sure. And that, like Abby was just saying, that training goes a little more in depth. That helps kind of dig into a lot of not just, reminders of what is Main Street, but what does it mean to be a board member for a Main Street organization? Because as you all know, it's a little bit different than being on maybe just an advisory board or some kind of other board. It's very hands-on, very grassroots engaged, which can be a lot sometimes. And so it's helpful sometimes to even have a space just to talk through that and figure out what that looks like for your organization too. Well, I'm not seeing any comments about, any other ways we can support you, but I also know you guys might have other thoughts. Feel free to email me. I would definitely be open to that. One thing we've talked about is maybe quarterly, potentially doing a board member call. So a time for you all just to get on and share thoughts. We can share updates. We can, have maybe some different programming, but that's something we've thought about. And so if you have any thoughts on that or think that would be helpful, I would love to hear feedback on that. But yeah, kind of last call for any other questions for Allie, for us, before we wrap up for the day. Well, not the day, but the hour. Still have a lot of the day left.
I think one thing that I just want to add is for those, staff also, but specifically for our volunteers is I know we all appreciate everything that you guys do. Being a volunteer is giving your time, talent, and treasure. So we know that you've got other things, families, careers, extracurriculars, and I know all of our communities just appreciate that you guys have taken some of that time, talent, and treasure to your communities.
Yes, thanks for saying that, Abby. Yeah, totally agree. As I was saying earlier, it's really something I feel like I usually end up saying when I go to do a board training is like, it's really easy for us to stand in front of you and tell you, you need to be doing all these things. And they are important, don't get me wrong. And we do that training for a reason, but we also really recognize the amount of effort and work it takes to be a board member and to be giving that time. And so this is why we want to give more opportunities to open up conversation. So thanks to those of you who engaged with us today, gave your thoughts, asked questions. Allie, thank you for sharing with us about purpose-driven leadership. It's something I feel like, I don't know, it's making me think too about in my own role about what that means. And I think that's really helpful just to be thinking about in this work that we do, because it's hard and there's days where we need to come back to our purpose on the days that it feels really difficult, So yeah. Okay. Well, with that, I guess I'll let everyone get back to your day. But thank you again. I will be posting this recording. I'll send you all an email once it's posted. Feel free, if you didn't have board members here today, please feel free to send this out. I'd love for them to watch it. And if they have feedback for me, again, just tell them to email me and I would love to hear it. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.